Guilt and shame. The manipulator evokes feelings of guilt or shame in the victim, even when they are not at fault. For example, a phrase like, "You've really let me down," can be used to make the victim feel obligated to fix things, forcing them to act in the manipulator's interest to rid themselves of guilt. Fear. The manipulator uses threats or intimidation to achieve compliance. This could be the fear of punishment, danger, or more subtle fears, such as losing a relationship or status. An example might be, "If you don't do this, we'll have serious problems," or "I'll find someone better if you don't change." Isolation. The manipulator restricts the victim's social contacts, reducing their access to support and information. For example, they may insist that your friends or family don't understand you or don't love you, convincing you to cut off contact with them. Playing on emotions. The manipulator leverages the victim's emotions to achieve their goals. They may evoke pity by portraying themselves as helpless, or invoke a sense of duty by reminding the victim of past favors. For instance, "I've done so much for you, and you can't even help me." Gaslighting. The manipulator makes the victim doubt their memories, perception of reality, or sanity. For example, a person might deny saying something even if it was clearly stated, saying, "You're imagining things," or "You're remembering it wrong." Gradually, the victim starts to question their abilities and becomes dependent on the manipulator. Flattery and praise. Excessive and often insincere praise is used to make the person feel obligated or more favorably disposed toward the manipulator. For instance, the manipulator may shower you with compliments and then ask for a favor, which becomes hard to refuse after such flattery, creating a sense of obligation. Nonverbal manipulation. In this technique, the manipulator uses nonverbal cues, looks, posture, gestures, to influence the emotions of the other person. For example, the manipulator might show clear disapproval through head nodding, crossed arms, or a contemptuous look, making the other person feel insecure or uncomfortable. Shifting focus. This technique involves consciously diverting attention from the main issue to something insignificant or irrelevant. This is done to hide the truth or avoid responsibility. For example, the manipulator may discuss trivial details of the problem, distracting from the main issue. Helplessness and victimhood. The manipulator portrays themselves as a victim to evoke sympathy and compassion. For example, "I'm suffering so much and you won't help me?" This creates pressure on you to feel obligated to help. Outright lies. The manipulator uses blatant distortion of facts or lies directly to achieve their goals. Even if the lie is obvious, the manipulator may continue insisting on their version of events, forcing the victim to agree or become confused. Creating the illusion of choice. The manipulator offers the victim several options, but all of them benefit the manipulator. This way, the victim feels they have freedom of choice, but in reality, all their decisions go in favor of the manipulator. For example, "You can either go to the meeting with me or stay home and miss out on an important opportunity." Coercive kindness. The manipulator does you a favor, creating the impression that you owe them. This kindness often comes with the expectation of a returned favor, making the victim feel obligated. For example, someone helps you without being asked, then demands help in return, making you feel indebted. Exaggerating problems. The manipulator exaggerates the negative consequences of an event or decision to instill anxiety or fear. This causes the victim to avoid actions that the manipulator deems undesirable. For instance, "If you do this, you'll lose everything." Carrot and stick method. The manipulator alternates between punishments and rewards to control behavior. After a punishment, they may offer a carrot, praise, a gift, or attention to maintain control over the victim. This creates dependency on the manipulator. Shifting responsibility. The manipulator shifts the blame for their mistakes or the consequences of their actions onto the victim. For example, if the manipulator makes a mistake, they might say, "You pushed me to this," or "It's your fault that I acted this way." Passive aggression. The manipulator avoids direct conflict but acts subtly, with sarcastic remarks, delaying requests, or expressing dissatisfaction through minor actions. For example, the manipulator agrees to something but then does it slowly and poorly to cause irritation. Reduction to absurdity. The manipulator takes your viewpoint or arguments to absurd extremes to discredit them. For example, if you suggest changing something, the manipulator may exaggerate. "Are you suggesting we completely change our way of life? That's insane." Information distortion. The manipulator provides incomplete, false, or distorted data, forcing the person to make a decision based on incorrect assumptions. This might be a partial truth or deliberate misinformation to shape a needed perception. Self-esteem. The manipulator gradually lowers the victim's self-confidence. This can happen through constant critical remarks, comparisons with others, or belittling comments that erode the person's self-worth and make them dependent on the manipulator's approval. Karpman, drama triangle. In this model of manipulation, the manipulator alternates between three roles: persecutor, rescuer, victim. The manipulator may start as the victim, evoking sympathy, then switch to the persecutor, blaming others for their problems, and finally offer help as the rescuer, creating dependency on their actions. This technique confuses the victim emotionally and makes them reliant on the manipulator. Creating dependency. The manipulator makes the victim dependent on them in some aspect of life, emotionally, financially, or physically. For example, the manipulator may only provide the information or resources that the victim needs, so they are always forced to turn to the manipulator for help. This increases the manipulator's control. Blurring boundaries. The manipulator invades the victim's personal boundaries, disrupting their comfort and forcing them to agree to things they are not comfortable with. For example, the manipulator may insist on intimacy or constantly seek help without accepting refusals or excuses. This creates a sense of guilt in the victim and forces them to give in. Authority pressure. The manipulator uses their position or status to exert pressure. This can happen in relationships with a boss, parents, or experienced colleagues. For example, "I've been here for 20 years, and I know how everything works, so you should listen to me." This tactic forces the victim to comply out of fear of authority. Changing the rules on the fly. The manipulator may suddenly change the rules of the game or agreements to catch the victim off guard. For example, after the victim agrees to one condition, the manipulator adds new requirements or changes the original terms. This creates a sense of unfairness for the victim, but they already feel obligated to continue. Complementary comparison. The manipulator praises the victim but compares them to others in order to create a sense of competition or dissatisfaction. For example, "You're doing this well, but look at how Maria handles it." This pushes the victim to strive to meet the manipulator's expectations. Forcing urgent decisions. The manipulator creates a sense of urgency, making the victim make decisions in haste without time to think. For example, "If you don't make a decision right now, you'll miss this opportunity." This allows the manipulator to get what they want while the victim is under stress. Citing fake authorities. The manipulator refers to authoritative sources or people to force the victim to accept their point of view. For example, they might say, "Experts say this is the best way, so you should do the same," even if this information is incorrect or distorted. Complex explanations. The manipulator uses confusing and complex explanations to make the victim feel incompetent in making decisions. For example, "This is too complicated for you to understand. Just trust me." The victim, feeling uncertain, begins to rely on the manipulator, believing they are unable to understand the situation on their own. Information manipulation. The manipulator deliberately hides or distorts information, providing only the data that benefits them. For example, they may show only the positive aspects of a decision while concealing its negative consequences. This forces the victim to make decisions based on incomplete or distorted information, which benefits the manipulator.